In this video, I'm going to look at some of the issues that are involved in maintaining good projects. It's one of the things that we have to understand about projects is that they have a tremendous impact on a lot of different businesses. By the way, an aside, I have posted under files on Canvas a series, or I will be posting, I have a couple posted already, but a series of PowerPoints that I use to lecture from in class. And so I'm basically, some of these talks that I'm having, I'm trying to keep them short, but I'm using video or these PowerPoints. And so I've made them available to you if you want to use them to study, or if you want to throw darts at it, you can do whatever you want. Anyway, I just want to make sure you have that information available to you. But when I'm talking about issues of projects, all projects have constraints. And these constraints mainly are the cost of the project, the scheduling of the project, because remember, every project has a beginning and ending date, and the scope of the project. The scope is critically important. Sometimes in textbooks, and I'm giving you an example of this in the PowerPoint, of what they call the iron triangle of a project, and that simply is this. We are constrained by these three factors under the understanding that these projects have to be, in this picture that I've given you shows that they have to be economically viable, economically or socially responsible, and environmentally sound, just like any good management issue should be. I mean, this is something that we maybe take for granted, but probably needs to be pointed out. And so that's why I like to show this slide to students, is that you can see that under the constraints of this project, it has to meet certain types of external environment applications, like being economically viable. If you can't afford it, you can't do it. And obviously, it has to be something that's going to fit within the structure of their organization, etc. So anyway, let's look at these constraints individually. And the constraints simply are the scope. And the scope is nothing more than what is the end result of this project? What is the deliverable that I'm going to produce? And how is it going to be used within the organization that is doing this project? In other words, we have to understand completely what the purpose of the project is. And we'll talk a little bit in another video clip or something I give you, is that every project has a well-defined scope. We'll have a scope statement, and it needs to be extremely well-defined. So this is something that's critically important. We also have to make sure that we have a schedule. We cannot, well, you all know that if you don't have a schedule for things, you can't get them done in a timely fashion. That's one of the criticisms I hear about the way I run a class, is I don't provide a set-in-stone schedule of activities within a class. I simply apply them as the time comes. As a project manager, I know what my time limits are, and I understand that there are certain things that we have to do by a certain point in time. Trust me, we'll get them done. This is one of my great failings as a project manager, is I don't communicate maybe as well as I preach. Maybe I ought to practice what I preach or teach more than I do. Anyway, every project needs a schedule, has to have a schedule. And if it doesn't have a schedule, we are not going to get things done in a timely fashion. You have to understand, what things can happen concurrently, what things have to happen sequentially. And if they don't happen in the proper order at the proper time, the schedule's going to be behind times and the project may fail. Likewise, you've got to have a budget. You have to have a schedule with the project. You have to have a budget with the project. The budget simply is, how am I going to obtain all the resources I have to make this project successful? And if I don't have the appropriate resources, this project is going to probably flop. And so we need to do that, but we also have to keep in mind there's some other constraints that maybe not quite as obvious, but one, we have to make sure the quality of the project is sufficient to meet exactly the expectations of the initiators of the project. And we'll talk about how projects are initiated. Actually, I'll give you videos on how they're initiated. But every project has an initiator, a person who might become the champion of the project. And they have certain expectations of the level of quality that this project really should have. And it has to be carefully spelled out and identified if the project is going to be one of quality. And nobody likes things that don't meet expectations, obviously. And that's essentially what quality is. So it's a combination of what we're doing and how we're doing it to make sure that the end result of the project meets the expectation of everybody involved. Okay? We have resources. Resources are simply things of value that are scarce, and we have to obtain those resources. That's one of the reasons we have to have a budget. But the project manager is responsible to make sure that all of the resources, whether it's a physical resource, human resource, whatever necessary to execute the project, is available. So we have to do it, and we have to know in advance what are those resources necessary for the execution of this project if this project is going to be successful. So that is critically important, with the understanding that there are always going to be certain issues, risks, problems that will come up. A risk basically is some unexpected or uncertain event that we can't control necessarily. Some we can. If it's a negative risk, it's a threat. If it's a positive risk, it's an opportunity. We have both. I'm sure you've all been exposed to SWOT analysis. Everybody loves talking about SWOT, strengths and weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Well, projects have opportunities, they have threats. And we have to be able to assess these and to be able to control them the best we can, understanding that we can't have completely control. All right? Now, who starts a project? Well, a project generally is started by somebody who has a vested interest in seeing that this project comes to completion or fruition. Now, they are not the only persons that are involved in a project. The people that are directly involved in a project we refer to as stakeholders. And who's a stakeholder? It's basically anybody who has a vested interest in the outcome of this particular project. Whether it's within an organization, might be external. It can be just about anybody. There's all kinds of stakeholders, and in the slides I present or I've given you a listing of potential stakeholders, but certainly some of the stakeholders are the program or the project initiator, or the champion of the project, certainly are the project team, the project manager, the end users of the project, et cetera, et cetera. There's a ton of different stakeholders that we have to be aware of, and we have to make sure that we understand who those stakeholders are. So we need to make sure that we know who they are. We need to make sure that we know what they are expecting and what their needs are. We need to know exactly how best to communicate them, and how to make sure that as the project moves along, the stakeholders are well informed. The overall success of any project depends on how well the project manager can motivate the team and how well they work with the stakeholders. So this is important. The stakeholders, if I had more time, I could tell you a lot of war stories about projects that I've been involved in, where my involvement was simply trying to smooth over the relationships with the project manager and the stakeholders, because it can be problematic. Just trust me. You can have some really, really, really bad situations occur. And you know that projects aren't going to be successful. I have given you on the PowerPoint slides that I'm dealing with some facts about projects and why projects don't work and some of the issues. And I invite you to look at those slides. By the way, as you go through these things, and I know I guess one of the reasons I absolutely am not a big fan of presenting information like this is I can't have a direct one-on-one, and there's no, since it's an asynchronous course, there's no specific time where I can meet each of you as you need. That's why if you have questions, please fire them off to me, and if there are enough questions about that are the same kind of questions, if you need, I could probably set up some type of an ongoing conference with you all. I don't know the best way of approaching this because I don't know who you are. This irritates me. I don't know who my students are, and one of the things as an instructor to me is exceedingly important is to know who you are. But unfortunately, I don't. And another sidebar, as you can see, when I lecture, I get somewhat sidetracked sometimes as thoughts pop into my head. I just simply want you to understand. I want you to learn. I'm not sure that just giving you information is the best way to learn. So the idea of successful projects simply is this. We know that they can be terribly unsuccessful for a variety of reasons. And like I said, I listed a bunch of these. But the concept is if the project manager understands where the potential problems are and where we might have failure, it helps you avoid those issues, knowing that every project is going to have issues. The last thing I have in these slides talks about the project management cycle, how where it starts and how it ends. There's always an initiation point where somebody who comes up with an idea, I need to have this done, they come up and they will think about it and hopefully will come up with a problem statement. And from that problem statement, we can then create a scope statement, which defines what the project's supposed to be and how it's supposed to work well. And then we can start developing a project plan. The project plan takes time, and it is of quintessential, the highest form of essence in terms of success of any project is planning it out well. Once the plan is set, keep in mind plans are not set in stone. When I talked about planning in the earlier video clip, I tried to make that perfectly clear, that the plan, while it's very extensive and very detailed, is always subject to change because things happen. We know that. So anyway, we are going to talk about how you go about developing a good project plan. What are the elements necessary? What are the things you must plan for? And if you look at the book, you can get kind of an idea of what we're going to be talking about. Then once the plan is established, then it's putting it into operation, operationalize, execute the plan. And the key here is for the project manager to be able to do two things very, very, very well. Number one, be a good leader, motivate the team. The team is going to be doing the activities. The project manager has to be the person who's going to be making sure that everybody is doing what they have to do in the way and at the time it has to be done, etc., as well as monitoring the project. Monitoring simply says we're overseeing what's happening in the project, and if things are on schedule, keep them going. If they aren't, let's kill the project, okay? So we have essentially the steps of a project are, number one, initiation of the project, the planning for the project, executing, monitoring, making sure we control it, and then at the end, making sure the project is closed and closed reasonably well, okay? So that's basically what we'll be studying here, is how we go about creating a good scope statement, how we go about creating a plan, how you start to execute that plan, how you monitor the process, and how you make sure that at the end you close the project properly, that everybody in the project is pleased with the overall outcome.